We have some news to bring you regarding Venezuela. It's been reported that the Organization of American States Electoral Observation Department says it can't recognise the official results of the election there that gave President Maduro a third term in office. Fresh protests are expected in the next few hours. This was Monday. Scenes of violence across Caracas. One person dying when security forces tried to break up protests triggered by Sunday's hotly disputed election result. Tear gas and rubber bullets fired at angry protesters who were challenging the re-election victory. Claimed by Mr. Maduro, that's been disputed, though, by the opposition and questioned by many other countries. Our South America correspondent Amy Wells has this report from Caracas.
The election result has set this city alight. Police, the armed forces, tasked with defending the result. Thousands of protesters who say they are defending democracy. The day began with less violent bangs, people hitting pots and pans, chanting freedom, protesting President Maduro's claim to victory.
It's terrible, a fraud. We won with 70%, but they did the same thing to us again. They took the elections from us again.
We want a better future for the youth, because if not, they'll leave the country, one where they can work well and earn well. We have a rich country, and he's destroying everything.
It's a fraud. It was the first time I voted in my life. I was there from 6 in the morning until 9 in the morning, and I saw a lot of people mobilizing in the street. There was a lot of discontent towards the government. The majority of people were voting for change.
As the day went on, thousands of people walked towards the presidential palace to protest the result. Some walking for miles from slums on the mountains surrounding the city. Cars and rubbish set alight around government buildings. Posters of President Maduro ripped down. A statue of his predecessor and mentor, Hugo Chavez, too.
This is something that will be worrying President Maduro. This is not opposition parties, this is not foreign governments disputing the result of this election. This is thousands and thousands of normal people from poorer neighbourhoods around the city coming down to protest at the presidential palace, disputing the results of this election, disputing his claimed victory, and quite literally setting the city alight this evening.
The police, military and armed paramilitaries sympathetic to the government hit back. Tear gas was fired at protesters, rubber bullets too.
This is not the first time that we are facing what we are facing today. There's an attempt to impose a fascist and counter-revolutionary coup in Venezuela once again.
The opposition say they've obtained more than 70% of the receipts from electronic voting machines and claim that this proves they've won.
This is a miracle. A miracle. Today, I want to tell all Venezuelans in the country and abroad, to all the Democrats of the world, we now have proof of the truth of what happened yesterday in Venezuela. We did it. We did it.
This war of words between the government and opposition, the spark for these clashes on the streets, now engulfing this city. Ione Wells, BBC News in Caracas.
There have been harsh crackdowns by the police and the military when there have been protests before. I asked Christopher Sabatini, who's a senior research fellow for Latin America at the US and the Americas program at Chatham House, if it felt different this time because the opposition is more unified.
There's several differences here, Lucy. The first one is that, as you mentioned, the opposition is unified. And this came out of an election. In the past, for example, in 2019, there were a wave of protest when the opposition tried to elect an interim president, sort of a shadow president, Juan Guaido. And that was trying to sort of force the military to intervene, to throw out Maduro and recognize this interim president they had elected in the National Assembly. This is different because citizens, millions of citizens, turned out to vote. And as you heard in the very good report by Oni, their vote counts are not being tabulated. It's not a transparent process. People wanted change. More than 80% of Venezuelans, according to polls, wanted to see a change of policy. And we simply don't know where they came up with the numbers that claim that Maduro won by 51% versus 44% for Edmundo González. So there's a complete lack of transparency.
And
There's
Christopher,
one other thing that makes us very different, and that is the international response. For the first time, you're seeing, for example, Brazil and Colombia are now speaking out and demanding to see the actas, the ballots, the paper ballots that the government is refusing to show that would purportedly reveal that the opposition had actually won. In the past, they've not been that willing to speak out so forcefully. And we've also seen governments from across Latin America, from the European Union, from the UK and Canada and the US, demand those same things. So the level of international pressure is unique this time.
can I ask you about the international response? The US particularly, Christopher, saying they've got serious concerns, incredibly cautious from them. Do you think that they're cautious because they think that Maduro could be forced to negotiate some kind of exit and they want to avoid tainting that process in any way?
I think that's right in part. I do think the United States doesn't want to sort of put Maduro in a corner. He's got a $15 million bounty on his head for narcotics trafficking that was leveled against him by the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States. He also has indictments from the International Criminal Courts against him for crimes against humanity. There needs to be some negotiated process if he's going to leave office. But what's also the United States is also trying to do here is trying to stay a step behind, to not paint this as a gringo imperialism versus Maduro, but trying to allow regional leaders, including the leftist government of President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil and the leftist government Gustavo Petro, to take the lead on it, so that the U.S. doesn't become the sort of the target of nationalism by Maduro, as you heard earlier.